cheers. This is White Russian. I'm very excited to introduce my guest. He's a professional drummer and educator, Jayson Brinkworth. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the invite.
Yes, it's great that you're here, and I've been waiting to have a conversation with you. You were born and raised, you were born and raised in Regina, Saskatchewan. How much has the city changed compared to the time when you were a kid?
Oh my goodness. A lot. Yeah, I've been here all my life. I had opportunities to move, but never really had a reason to move. But yeah, the city has changed quite. Obviously, it's growing. The people, it is way more diverse now culturally. In many ways, it's amazing. Business is growing. It's a completely different city that I remember, from being 10, even 20, 30 years old. It's changed a lot in a really good way. I think Regina is changing in a really positive way for a lot of industries, including the arts, including music and sports and culture and everything. I think there's a lot of positives about this location in the world.
Do you remember the first time you held drumsticks in your hands?
The first time I held drumsticks. Well, I wanted to play drums since I was 5, and I had bugged my parents, and it was, the noise and the space and everything. And it took until I was 13 for them to realize that I wasn't really going to stop asking. And I remember it was September of 1983, just before I started grade 9. And I had my very first drum lesson on the Saturday. And it was at 11 a.m. at the Academy of Music in Regina, which is now the Long McQuaid. And I remember sitting, waiting for this lesson, and it was like the greatest thing ever. And, and I was lucky as a kid to grow up playing sports and stuff, but this had something really special about it. And I remember walking in the room and getting this pair of drumsticks, and they were pearl drumsticks. And I remember they had the green logo on it, and I got a practice pad to take home and a Ludwig book. And I was just like, it was fantastic.
A lot of talented musicians who grew up in a relatively small place like Regina come to realization that they have to move to a bigger city in order to succeed. And you already mentioned that you never had a reason to. So can you please talk a little bit more about it?
Well, when I was through high school, I was very lucky in high school. The high school I went to, Martin Collegiate in Regina, there was a great sports program there, and I was involved in a lot of sports. I played hockey and baseball and football, but the music program in the high school, there was a lot of plays, and there was a lot of there was a great jazz band and a vocal choir and stuff. So there was a lot of opportunities to be involved in things in high school in that regard. And after high school, I had thought about obviously what I was going to do. And at one point I thought, you know what, in Los Angeles, there was a PIT, Percussion Institute of Technology, was a school. And I thought that might be really kind of cool to go there, but it was really, really expensive. And you used to have to like send a letter to apply and then mail it, and then they'd mail it back. And, and it was just a lot of money, and it just wasn't in the cards to do that. So I went a different route. And when I was 19, I ended up joining a band that was traveling around Canada playing, and I joined that band and went on the road for 6 months, and went the route of that rather than the school route. And I didn't really have to move away because I just kind of kept coming back here, and I'd go to play and come back to Regina, and just realized that there was a lot of things here that I wasn't really missing out on at that point. So, at that point, there was a chance to move in my early 20s. I had chances to move to Vancouver. There was a possibility, Nashville had always been talked about, but my oldest kids were born when I was in my 20s. So that really kept me here and kept me grounded in a really good way. There was never any regret of like staying here. And now I look back and I'm very thankful for that, because, with the internet and everything now, you could live anywhere and do business and be part of anything almost.
Yeah, it's certainly true. The other question I wanted to ask you is this. It's been a common belief that it's hard to make a living in Canada if you're a professional musician unless you're famous. What do you think about it?
Well, it depends what famous is. And so, everybody's idea of success is different too, and it's all relative to your own situation and surroundings. So yeah, it's not something that a lot of people, especially in this part of Canada, in the middle of nowhere, as people might say, to make a living playing music seems pretty far-fetched, and that doesn't seem like something that should happen. But I realized when I was around 30, I realized that, I really wanted to try to make music what I do for a living. But the secret to that I found was being diverse. And I found that if I was just going to play in bands, that was one thing, but there was only a certain amount of work you could have. If I was going to get hired to play in the studio and play on records, that was another thing, but it wasn't all of that. And I had started teaching drums when I was 17, I believe. Yeah, 17. I was in grade 12. And I realized that I really, really liked that. I really enjoyed the idea of passing along information. And I was doing it, I always felt I was doing it from the right spot of not just to do it because, there was some money attached. I was doing it because I loved when people got something and I would always be giving and they would understand, and I'd get them past over these humps of playing, and we'd get over little leaps and stuff. And it was amazing to me. And I love that. So I realized that the education side was kind of the longevity in the whole thing, because it's an honest service. And, and I did enjoy teaching, and I thought I was all right at it. So I thought, I can do this if I balance all these things and be diverse. And I know my family, my dad's side of the family farmed, and they all had always talked about diversity in the farming. And I'd always heard that word. And I realized that that's kind of the secret in almost any career, but especially in this, when you're in a place that technically it shouldn't happen, but it can happen and it can be amazing. And you're still in this place and not hustling, in a city of 1 million people and, trying to make $50 to buy groceries. It's just a different thing. And I was lucky enough that I went that direction, and it kind of worked as things moved along.
Yes, that's great. So for how many decades have you been teaching then? You mentioned grade 12, right?
Yeah.
How many years has it been?
Well, I taught, I started teaching when I was in grade 12, and then I taught up until I went on the road when I was 19, but I was playing in different bands in town at that point as well. So there was all kinds of little things going on. And then I went on the road, and I came back, and it wasn't the best experience. It wasn't a good group of people and stuff, but I learned a lot of life lessons and a lot about myself by doing that. And I came back and I thought, I need to maybe go to school and have something else, that I can do, another skill. So I went to school for electronics and kept teaching drums while I was doing that, and that paid for my education in electronics. So I taught, and then I started working in the electronics industry, but I was always playing music. But at that point, teaching had stopped a little bit because my kids were young. I was working a day job. So that there just wasn't enough time in the day. Then when I was 30, some things in life had changed, and I dove back into teaching, all in. And I was like, you know what, this is sort of a path I need to go on. And then that sort of happened. And then when I was 32, a friend and myself started teaching at a building. We had just rented space and rented a couple rooms and started teaching out of there. And that eventually grew, and that became Music in the House that it is today, 20 years later.
I see. What advice can you give to those folks who want to learn how to play drums but don't know where to begin?
Well, I honestly believe, and this might sound kind of crazy, but I honestly believe everybody's a drummer. They just don't know it. And I believe this about every human being. And I also believe that if anybody ever said they never wanted to sit behind a set of drums and play, I think they're completely lying, because it's the best, right? So I think if anybody is thinking about playing drums or learning about rhythm or learning about music, the best thing is now, like nowadays, you can go online and there's so many resources online on YouTube to watch videos to be inspired, and amazing stuff out there. There's some stuff out there that's not great, but there is some really, really good stuff out there. And wherever you live, if there's a music store, if there's a music school, you know, if you have friends that take lessons, taking anything, you know, just ask around and find out where this happens and how you could get involved in it. And, you know, I think it is important for everybody to have in their lifetime. I think everybody should learn an instrument and should play sports, because it teaches you self-discipline. It teaches you teamwork. It teaches you all these things that as you know, get older, even if you don't play music or sports anymore, you're dealing with it every day in a work environment. In anything you do, those things teach us a lot of those lessons. But I honestly believe that playing drums is like one of the best things on the planet.
Can you please talk a bit about your brand, the Stickman?
So the Stickman clothing company, I'll just show you. I have this drum head that I just had done.
Cool.
It started years ago in 2006. I had been, I just actually dropped the drumstick I was going to pick up here. I had been a drum company that I was working with. We were working on a logo for a drumstick, and they wanted me to come up with an idea for something to put on this stick with my name. And I had just drawn this little stick guy that was playing the drums. And I thought, okay, well, we'll just put that on there. So they put that on there. And that was all that was. Fast forward to 2012, and friends of mine had an idea to start a drum event, a camp, and we would bring in amazing drummers from kind of all around the world, and people would come and they would stay for the 4 days and have lessons and classes and everything. And we called it the Stickman Drum Experience because we had this logo and it kind of fit, and it just was that. Fast forward again, you know, to 2018, 2019, we started thinking, because the music school had been around for a while in Regina. I've lived here my whole life. My wife moved here from Toronto in 2005. My kids have grown up in this city and have been involved in sports and music. And I thought, you know, now's the time to maybe give back to the community and that's a responsible move, I think, on anybody's part. When you're somewhere for a while, you just do that. So we thought, you know, we have this idea of this drummer, but then it morphed into, like, Pickman was the guitar player, and then there was Stickman was a hockey player, and so it went into the music and sports worlds. And we thought, is there a way that we could do this and have some merchandise and give back to something in our community? Could we do that? And we came up with a plan and a marketing idea where we have hoodies and shirts and decals and masks, and there's all kinds of little things we have that people buy, and a percentage of all the sales goes back into, there's an organization called Creative Kids, which helps kids get funding to be part of music lessons or art lessons or anything like that. And there's another group in Saskatchewan called Kids Sport, and it helps kids get funding to be involved in hockey and, you know, bike riding, all, like any sports. So we give a portion of those proceeds of sales back to those organizations so kids can be involved in this city and province doing stuff that I was fortunate enough to do. My kids were fortunate enough to be involved in, you know, the kids that we have for lessons, they're all involved in that anyway. So it just made sense for us to start doing that. And we started it last November. So it's coming up on a year, and we're still tweaking things, but we really want to make it a long-term thing where annually we can start giving money back and doing more things in the community and just being, you know, just being responsible citizens that way in our own, you know, backyard of where we are.
I see. I'm going to be honest with you. one of my key goals in life has always been the pursuit of freedom. And we, of course, can speculate about its illusionary nature, but that's besides the point. What I've been noticing again and again, and what I have been jealous of, is how free many musicians actually are. And I mean, not just on stage, but in the regular life as well, in their demeanor, for instance. And I noticed this about you right away as soon as we met. In fact, actually, you're always laid back and comfortable in your own self. So what gives you a sense of freedom?
That's a really good question, actually. That's great. The laid back thing, that's really funny. If you would ask my 9-year-old son that question, he'd be like, I don't think my dad's very laid back, but that's beside the point. You know what? I've always, that's always been part of my personality, I guess. I've always had this outgoing nature, but I find that I don't get worked up too much about things. And I've, especially as someone gets a little older, they start gaining more perspective on things. But in the artistic thing, I think you're right about that there is an ability to maybe not let go, but just not let things sort of weigh you down. And it must be the creative side of things too. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's just something that it's all I know. You know what I mean? And I know a bunch of people have pointed that out, and it kind of always surprises me. I'm like, really? Because I don't see it all the time. And then when I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't get too worked up about stuff. But I think having the experiences I had when I was younger, which were amazing, you know, playing sports and being able to play music and doing all the stuff I did in high school. I think having my kids when I was younger taught me a lot about that. And it really taught me about balance and about, you know, focusing on things that are more important and being able to sort of let go of the things that I don't have a lot of control over, which I think is a good quality. because I know high blood pressure. There's some medical things that run in my family, and I'm very aware of that. But you know, this is probably good that I can let that go and not get worked up. But yeah, it is one of those things. But I really find when I'm around music and I'm around teaching and I'm around that, I always find I'm very relaxed. Like it just sort of puts my mind in a very calm place. You know, and I, you know, I could be on gigs where I'm playing in front of a lot of people and get a little nervous, but I don't get nervous. I don't ever remember being like super nervous about something. And I don't know why I can calm myself and do that, but I guess it's a gift in some ways.
Yes, you're very lucky, I think. It's been more than 2 weeks since Charlie Watts, the Rolling Stones drummer, has passed away. Can you please comment on his drumming style?
You know, the Charlie Watts, when I was growing up, the music that was played in my house from my parents, it was just mostly country music, old school country. So I hadn't really heard, aside from some radio stuff, I wasn't really influenced by the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. That wasn't played until a little later for me, until I kind of discovered it on my own. And I always thought he had this amazing feel, and the music had this energy about it that was really, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just awesome. Like anytime I heard their songs, I thought, you know, there's just something going on inside this that, you know, Keith Richards playing, I've always thought he's a fantastic guitar player. Mick Jagger's voice is super unique. You know, Ron Wood's, like the whole thing. But Charlie Watts he just had this thing in his playing. But it's one of those things that you don't appreciate when you're 13, 14, 15, and you're just learning to play the drums. And when I was playing, my teacher that I had at that time was really into progressive music. So he was feeding us a lot of like Rush and Yes and Genesis and stuff like that, which I dug, but that wasn't, you know, something that was on the forefront. There was other bands I liked, but I just played it because it was something there. As I got older, though, I really started appreciating what, you know, the drummers like Ringo and Charlie Watts brought to the music that they played. And it wasn't really until the Rolling Stones played in Regina in, what year was that they played here? I can't even remember.
2006, I think.
2006, right. And I went to the show, and I had taken my son, who at that time was 14. He was 14 years old. So we went to the show to see the Rolling Stones, which was a big deal. You know, the fact that they played Regina was a big deal. The fact that we got to see them, and that blew my mind, because I just sat there going, these guys at that time were they in their 60s, or probably early 60s at that time. And they were rocking, and they had this crowd in the palm of their hands. And Charlie Watts is sitting back there, and he's the coolest, just hanging out, playing. And I was like, okay, that is exactly what playing drums is about, right there, moving, 30,000, 40, 50,000 people. I can't remember how many were in the stadium. And he's just smiling the whole time. And I'm like, that's it. So then I really gained an appreciation. So I really started digging back in their catalog and really getting into his playing. And he was an amazing drummer, but he was an amazing person. And you read all these stories about how he was so giving with his time, and he loved, American jazz. And he was a big fan of that. And, Miles Davis, and he just knew all this stuff, and he would go to these clubs and hang out. And it was just like, he seemed like the nicest guy. He just happened to be this drummer in, one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. And even since his passing, I've been going back and watching old interviews and stuff. And it's just, it's incredible, again, how someone in his position can keep perspective on that and go, I do this, but that's not just who I am. I do this other stuff too. And it's like, how do you separate that when you're the drummer in the Rolling Stones? So he's amazing. Like he was an incredible human being.
Can you name 3 contemporary drummers who stand out to you the most in terms of their skill level?
Oh my goodness. That's just such a tough question, because it goes all over the map stylistically. I would say for me, and everybody has their own sort of tastes on things, but when I was growing up, I really started leaning towards sort of the Los Angeles studio sound of the 80s. And I really got into a band. There was a band from the 80s through the 90s, and they still are in existence, and a band called Toto. And Jeff Porcaro was the drummer, and he passed away in 1992. But he, for me, was like the greatest. And the reason is not just because he played in that band and what he did in that band was great. He played on like Michael Jackson records and Steely Dan records and Michael McDonald and all, like he played on thousands of records. And I was always thinking, how does someone do that? Like, how does someone have the skill set to play on a jazz record and then a pop record and then a funk record and then a rock record? And they just are able to do all of that stuff. So to me, I was infatuated by those guys who did that. So, guys like Jeff Porcaro, another guy is John Robinson is his name. And it's not a household name, but everybody has heard him play. You'll hear him play every day on the radio. And he's played with Steve Winwood, again, Michael Jackson. He played on the song Thriller. Those guys just have this skill set that they are able to sort of morph into almost anything and play almost anything and make it sound like that's the only style of music that they play. And it's crazy, right? So those are two guys. And then other guys like Steve Gadd is another drummer, amazing player, and Vinny Colaiuta. And they're more studio guys, more side guys that were hired by bands. So they don't really play in a band per se, but they're on all these records that people hear on the radio all the time. And I was always infatuated with that world. And I thought, it'd be really cool to be able to, go play with someone and, play some jazz, and then the next day go play with someone and, play some funk music, and then go play something else. And, just being stimulated by all that. But then on the technical side, there's amazing players like Neil Peart. No one will deny his greatness. Danny Carey from Tool, Bill Bruford from Yes, Phil Collins is an amazing drummer. Like, there's so many guys, but they all just have their things that they do, and they all do them very well. And you just have to find you know, something, because everybody digs something else, you know what I mean? Some people like carrots, some people like broccoli. It's, you know, some people like Rush, some people like the chili peppers. They're a little bit different, but neither are better or worse than the other.
That's a very diplomatic answer, but I'll take it. Why there are so few renowned female drummers, in your opinion?
You know, I don't actually know. And there shouldn't be, because, you know, in the 70s, in the band The Carpenters, Karen Carpenter was an amazing drummer. She was an amazing vocalist. She was an amazing drummer, incredible drummer. You know, through the 80s, Sheila E., who played with Prince, absolutely fantastic. Current day, Cindy Blackman Santana, who's married to Carlos Santana, an amazing player. Terry Lynn Carrington. You know, there's all these amazing female players that play all different styles of music, but it just seems that, I don't know if it's just by the numbers, but there might be more, how would I say this in the right way? In the teenage years, I think males are more apt to like start playing drums than females. But that has changed a lot, because in the last 8 years, for sure, I've seen a huge increase of females come in for lessons, and it's all ages. Like my youngest student I have right now is 5, and it's a girl, little Dylan, and she's amazing. And it's like, okay, well, she's gonna, you know, clean up here. But I just think there are amazing female players out there that are really starting to make waves and get a lot of attention. And it's not a male dominated instrument by any stretch. It just seems that, I don't know, just maybe, I don't know, the physicality or the madness of it or the craziness of playing drums. I just don't think right away a female would go, yeah, that's my thing, you know. But what I have noticed though is the females that play the drums play they're very organized in their thoughts. They have way more coordination than the guys, especially right away. And they really think through things. And it's not just about playing as loud and fast as you can. You know, they'll have a more methodical sort of approach to playing the instrument, which is it's always interested me that just the different approaches that, you know, a male and female. And obviously if they're 15, you know, a guy at 15 is just coming in just to beat the crap out of the drums.
There has been a lot of speculation that with the development of new technologies and new styles of music, live instruments and live music in general would become a thing of the past. Thankfully, this didn't happen. How do you see the future of music, and what direction are we going?
Well, that's another great question. I remember in the 1980s when the drum machine came out. And when the drum machine came out and producers and songwriters were able to program their own drum parts, and it sounded great. You know, the machine never talked back. There was never any attitude, and it never showed up late and stuff. All the drummers were going, well, this is the end. This is the end of drummers. Like we're doomed now. They're just going to be able to program anything they want. And that didn't happen because people realized, and the general public, I think, was the glimpse into it, but producers and songwriters and musicians realized that a human being brings something that a machine will never bring to the table. And it doesn't matter how good the machine is, because nowadays the machines are like what you can do now is on your phone. You know, there's albums being made by people on their phones now. And it's like, what? This is crazy. But technology can only take you so far. The human element has to come in, because everybody, when you listen to music or see art or anything, everybody wants an emotional experience. Everybody wants to have something move them. And if it's too reliant on technology, it can move you to a certain extent, but it just can't go all the way as a human being, because we need that. And I think that that's been the driving thing, you know, since the drum machine in the 80s moving forward. I think that human element has always come back around. And anytime, you know, new keyboards have been invented, new programs to record music, anything like that has made things more convenient. At first, it sort of pushes the human element down a little bit because it's pretty easy, but the human element always comes back. It always comes back that there has to be someone with that emotional attachment delivering the information. And I think moving forward, it's just interesting how technology now, people haven't really embraced it, or they're starting to change how they're embracing technology of being convenient to being just part of their workflow and sort of their instrument that they use. Right. And they're not relying heavily on technology going, well, this is the only way I have to do it. And I'll take the human element of it out of it and it'll be way easier. And it's like, no, we have to keep that in there and bridge those two things together. So I think moving forward, people are going to still, get into the technology side of it, but I think they're going to implement the live playing along with it. And you're seeing that a lot online now, where you see a lot of videos where there'll be someone, playing drums or playing guitar or something, and there could be a program running in the background, but it's not just the program. They actually are playing live and working at playing instruments. And the other thing that I'm really seeing is people wanting to take lessons and learn an instrument. That's still very valid, in 2021 going into 2022, that's still very valid, that people want to show up and have the experience of like learning from someone in person. And last year was a real good example of that, where we had to go online and that changed, and, it worked, it served its purpose, but it wasn't like being in the same room. And then when we went back to in-person lessons, it became very clear that that is a special thing that we shouldn't take for granted, is the sharing of information, face to face in the room, going through the motions of that. And people still really want that. Human beings will always need that. That's just something that has to happen in music or anything, thankfully. But I think that technology and the live element are just going to bridge together and work side by side, rather than one working over top of the other. I think that's sort of in my opinion, that's how things are moving now and forward.
Jayson, thank you so much for this interview. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to talk about this and have me share some of my story.
Yes, thanks again. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Cheers. This is White Russian. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click on like. There'll be many more interesting interviews coming up very soon, so stay tuned.